So we're going to start off, which this should be a fairly short assignment for us today and for anybody at home watching this. And I know it says I can identify each body system, its function, in order to determine how it interacts with other body systems, which is what we wrote on the board very messily on the top of the anchor chart there. But we're going to start off with something that, Carter, we've already studied before. So this is the second time we have seen this, although I will take a little bit more time to go over it a little bit more in depth this time. The first time we went over this, I'm not going to lie, Mason, the only reason why I went over this the first time is I knew 100% for a fact it was going to be on the very first benchmark, and it does not make sense to study this, in my eyes, until now. And that is unicellular and multicellular organisms. Unicellular and multicellular organisms. I would take some time to write these two things down in my notebook. Maybe the top half of the page for unicellular, the second half of the page for multicellular. As we start to take notes on these two things, we're going to talk about their differences, their similarities, and what makes each of them unique. So hopefully somewhere in your notebook you've got these two words, unicellular and multicellular, and you need to know that these are organisms. These are living things that we're going to be talking about, unicellular versus multicellular. And I would hope, Noon, that going back in time, there's like some dust being knocked off these words in your brain. You're starting to thinking, I kind of remember that. I remember talking about unicellular organisms, and I remember talking about multicellular organisms, and I think it was rather simple, and it is. We know that multicellular organisms have large numbers of specialized cells. You're going to see that word pop up a lot. Anytime you see something about specialized cells, I know that I'm talking about a multicellular organism, specialized cells, because that means you have more than one type of cell. Specialized cells have a very special job. They pretty much do one specific thing. Unicellular organisms do not have that luxury. Unicellular organisms are one cell, and they have to do everything inside of that one cell. They must complete all of their life functions inside of that one cell. Whether that's respiration, like breathing in and out, whether that's moving waste through their body, all inside of one cell. And there's things that we'll get into as we move along. So unicellular versus multicellular is very important. Unicellular. Again, here's some great examples. I would take time to jot these words down. Bacteria, amoebas, most microscopic organisms are unicellular. Again, how do I know if an organism is unicellular? I should be able to show Ruby any organism on Earth after this, and she should be able to tell me if it's unicellular or multicellular. And she's probably going, well, Mr. Bowens, how am I supposed to be able to do that? If there is only one cell, it is unicellular. If there's more than one cell, guess what? Multicellular. It is as easy as it sounds. So I do want you to take some time to jot this down. I'm going to put this on the anchor chart as well. So let's go ahead and get that down really quickly, and I'll put this on freeze. So when I start to talk about all of these different things, bacteria, amoebas, parameciums, euglenas, all of these unicellular organisms, I do need to know that they carry, again, this part's very important, carry out all of life's processes inside of that one cell. There's only one cell. So there is something about unicellular organisms that we all need to understand. They have a shorter lifespan than multicellular organisms. A shorter lifespan. Any kind of damage to that one cell pretty much means that cell is going to die. In a multicellular organism, and I guarantee you probably 3/4 of you in here right now have some sort of a scab or scar or scratch or something on yourself right now, right? Looking around, people are shaking their head, yes, especially in my homeroom where people tend to push each other down during recess all the time because you're silly. And there's skinned hands, skinned knees, and things of that nature. I know people play travel ball. I'm certain that there's some people in here with cuts and scrapes. If you were a single-celled organism, you probably would not be in here today because you would not be able to survive that. Multi-celled organisms are able to overcome that because there are other cells that come in to take place of the cells that have been injured. There are other cells that come in to repair other cells that have been injured, and you're not dependent on that one cell surviving like you are if you are a unicellular organism. If you're unicellular, there are no other cells to come help you out if you get hurt. You are probably not going to make it. So somewhere in there, I would jot down that unicellular organisms have a short lifespan. So as we think about unicellular organisms, we know that they are very tiny because it's one cell. Now, Nicola, not all of them. It's not everyone, because I have seen some things that break the rule, but for a majority, right? Most of them are microscopic. What does that mean if something is microscopic? Well, you can't see it. You need a microscope, right? Need a microscope to see them. Pretty easy definition there of microscopic. I think you'll be able to figure that out. I do want to go over a couple more things about unicellular organisms, and when we get to these two things, and I'll come back to this portion here, I think at the end when there's a slide, but unicellular organisms obviously have the ability to reproduce, or there wouldn't be any more of them, correct? So that's something they actually have in common with multicellular organisms. And we'll get into the whole thing about like DNA and passing down of genes and how they're very similar, which is not a shock to anybody. But the other thing about unicellular organisms is they have to have some way to take in food, and they need energy to survive. They don't run on tiny little batteries or anything. They need energy to survive. They have to take in food in order to survive, just the same as we do. We have to take in food in order to survive. And just like us, in any animal, if we take in food, at some point there's going to be waste from that, right? And we have to have a way to get rid of that waste. Well, guess what? Unicellular organisms also have to have a way of getting rid of waste. They just don't have like an entire system dedicated to digestion and excreting that waste. They have to do all of that inside of one cell, which sounds like a full-time job, doesn't it? Aren't you glad you have other cells in your body taking care of the things for us that we don't have to worry about, as opposed to being just this one cell where you got to worry about respiration, taking in energy, getting rid of waste, moving around, protecting yourself, and all of the other things associated with living, right? So I'll jump to this slide really quickly. I just jotted down they need energy to survive, and they are able to reproduce. So I think if we take a look at just the slide and our notes, I think we all feel fairly comfortable, and for the most part, at least people in here are kind of nodding, saying, yeah, Mr. Bullens, I remember a majority of this stuff that you've told me about unicellular organisms. You've added a couple of new things in there about having a short lifespan and needing energy to survive, and they can reproduce, but for the most part, I think you covered most of that at the beginning of the year, and you're correct. We did. We covered this already. As a matter of fact, we used these exact slides to cover this at the beginning of the year. If there are unicellular organisms where there's just one cell, if you have more than one cell, you are everyone in the class is asleep. You are a what? Multicellular organism. Multicellular organism. We're going to take a look at that here in just a moment. Well, if we've covered unicellular, and I think for the most part, other than maybe talking about their similarities, Victoria, between the two things, I think that's a lot of information that we have on unicellular organisms. Now we need to talk about multicellular organisms. Multicellular organisms are made up of more than one cell. If you are one cell, you fit the uni definition. If you are not more than one, if you have more than one cell, you are not uni anymore. You are multi. Probably one of the most important things on here, Carter, is this very next sentence. They need specialized cells. Anytime I see that word, specialized cells, and we are this close, Ruby, into talking about specialized cells. Heart cells, bone cells, respiratory cells, nervous cells. We're going to start talking about all of these different types of systems in our body that have very special cells that do very special things. If you have specialized cells, one thing that gives it away is that it's more than one cell, right? It doesn't say specialized cell. It says specialized cells. Well, if you have more than one of something, you can no longer be uni. But if you see that word specialized, specialized is always going to be talking about a multicellular organism. Again, we are complex. We saw that, what was that, when we were watching the video? An elephant has 1,000 trillion cells in its body. 1,000 trillion. Still trying to wrap my head around that number. Humans, bears, multicellular because we have many cells that carry out different life processes. I'm going to pause this so we can take our notes. So I've taken some time to type down some notes just like we did with unicellular organisms. And we mentioned some of the same stuff that is on this page, and there might be some other stuff on this page that is new to us. And again, we'll take time to pause, Braden, and jot this stuff down. Multicellular organisms have more than one cell. They're made up of many cells. I would imagine most of us probably already have that written down. The cells work together to keep the organism alive. They kind of have like one main goal. Keep the thing that I'm inside of alive. If there is injury to a cell, if you're a unicellular organism, that's pretty much the end, right? Go ahead and start and write your will. If you're a unicellular organism, you get injured. If we have an injury, it's not a big deal because two things happen. Other cells can replace that injured cell, and you have other cells in your body that can help repair that. Because we have so many different cells and the ability to help repair things, we have a longer lifespan. We live longer, thank goodness, than unicellular organisms. Not only if we get halfway through ecosystems and then we'd be like a whole new class and a new teacher if we were unicellular organisms. Mason says that sounds good to him or something over there. Yeah, half a quarter. But then you wouldn't be around anymore. So that part's not a lot of fun. All the way kindergarten through high school in half a year, pretty much. And then you're done. No time to enjoy anything if you're a unicellular. Multicellular organism is different. Again, you notice I put this down here in a different color when they're talking about specialized cells. Who thinks specialized cells might end up on the test? Yeah, fairly certain specialized cells. That's another one of those, like estuary and brackish, that I'm willing to bet money Tori will show up on the EOG too. Something about specialized cells. Every specialized cell in your body, and we'll get into those very soon when we talk about the human body systems, and that's why I teach it like this, Haley. I think if I'm telling you about special cells, I feel like the next thing I should say to you is, here are those special cells. But they don't do that for some reason. They think I should just skip that and stop at unicellular versus multicellular and then start talking about endangered species or something. It kind of makes sense, but I would rather tell you about the body systems and how they work and explain those special cells now that I'm on that, which makes a lot of sense to me. So specialized cells to help keep, not THR, I have no idea what that is, the multicelled organism alive. Who needs time to jot this down? Anybody in here? So unicellular versus multicellular. We'll come back and take a look at this later. I do want to stop with this today. This is where I'm kind of going to wrap things up for us in here and for people at home. I'll try to do this when I do my Zoom as well. Unicellular and multicellular. As I've looked through some things, there are every once in a while you're asked to find what do these things have in common. And they do, Nicola, have a few things that are similar. They both have to have food for energy. They need energy to survive. If they don't have energy, guess what? They're not going to make it. So me and the euglena, the little teeny tiny euglena, we both have to have energy. If we don't have energy, we don't have food, we're not going to make it. Carter, if we're taking in food, guess what? We have to have a way to get rid of it, right? Because as you eat food, your body can't use everything. There's waste involved when you eat food. Not everything. You get the energy and the things that you need, but the stuff that's left over gets processed and moved through your body. And we'll take a look at that in just a second for the second time. We've seen that before. And looking back at the unit we just finished, genetics, both of them have DNA that they pass on to their offspring. And we will stop our video here.